Hey y'all, welcome to Life with Lorelei. This is Rory. We're working with Coca-Cola and One Warm Coat to loom knit a scarf today. One Warm Coat is trying to provide 500,000 people with warm items for the winter. So I've got my all-in-one knitting board to work with today. And we're actually going to make it a little bit smaller and easier to work with. So I'm going to unscrew the board, take off the little washers, and just easily comes apart. So I'm going to go ahead and put those over there. Got to push out the screws a little bit from having been tightened. Just takes a little pop. And we're going to come in with our shorter screws. I'm going to put it in the first hole, right there, and the middle one. And I've got these smaller little blocks. I'm going to put them on here. Just easily snap in place the board. Make sure when you're twisting this back on, you get it on nice and tight. You don't really want much wiggle room because it can just make it a little bit harder to knit. So there you go. Now you've just made your main board a little smaller. Well, I've got a very nice, pretty, variegated colored yarn, and it's got this nice little curly-Q look to it. And we're just going to make a simple cast on with a slip stitch. You're just going to make your little loop, grab the bottom piece, and pull it through to make a new loop. You're going to attach it to your first peg. Pull the correct side of the yarn, and descend your tail through the middle of the knitting board. It'll make it a little bit easier to work with. And you're just going to take your yarn and wrap it around the peg. And again. You're going to actually do this twice. So you've already got the one loop. You're now going to make a second one over the top. So, and you're just going to keep going to the third peg and make those two loops again. It's a little bit difficult with a knitting board because the pegs are so close together. So I'm sorry if I accidentally cut off some of what you're seeing. I'm just trying to make sure the yarn goes in the right place. Now I've made it to the width I want, which is about halfway between the second and third hole here. And you can also, just to double check if you want, get a second scarf. And just double check how wide you want it, maybe. So I went a little bit wider by like 4 stitches than this scarf here. So now we're going to set the cast on stitch. So the reason you have 2 loops is you're going to take this bottom loop with your loom hook, and you're going to pull it up and over the top one. So take the bottom loop and pull it up and over the top. You're going to go from underneath is easiest. And just keep pulling it up and over. Sometimes you may need to go from top if it makes it a little bit easier for that particular loop. So I'll meet you at the end of the cast on here. So I finished the cast on. I just went back this way over my loops. My working yarn is over here still. So now what you're going to want to do is bring the yarn to the front of the knitting board because you're going to purl back to the start. And just as a review for people who don't know or may have forgotten, if I can work this correctly, you're going to pull your yarn underneath the loop on the peg, and you're going to bring it through the middle, creating a new loop. You're going to take the previous stitch off the peg and put the new loop on the peg and pull tight. And you're just going to keep doing this all the way across. Unlike the cast on, you want to go from the top of the stitch down to grab the working yarn. I'll meet you back at the beginning. Okay, so now I'm back at the beginning. Now we're just going to knit to the right. When you make a scarf like this, the very simple basic knit purl scarf, you're going to purl to the left and knit to the right, always. So you're just going to take your yarn, and just like with the cast on, you're just going to loop your peg, but only once this time. You already have the bottom loop in place. And you're just going to slippery peg. You're just going to keep winding it across. I find it easier to just wind first, pull the loop up second. So now that you've wrapped to the end, you're just going to pull the stitches over just like in the cast on. Okay, so now we've knitted all the way to the end here. We're just going to purl back. Get my yarn in the right place. Okay, so now that we've reached the beginning again, you're just going to keep knitting, purling until you reach your desired length. I'll come back when we're a little bit longer, show you my progress. So I'll see you guys in a bit. Hey y'all, as you can see, we've got our scarf pretty long and at our desired length. So we are going to do our cast on. You're just going to take your yarn, you're going to wrap the second peg, and you're going to wrap the first. Doesn't really matter which way you wrap them, just as long as they get wrapped. And you're going to pull the bottom loop up over the top. And this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. You're going to take the loop from the second peg that you just made and put it over on top of the first peg. And then you're going to do another wrap around the first peg. Take both of these loops. I'm going to take them first, if I can. My yarn will cooperate. You're going to take both those loops and go over the new yarn. You're now going to take this loop and put it back on the second peg. And you're just going to keep doing this across the board. Second peg, first peg, pull over, pull over. Put second loop on first peg, wrap, pull off, new loop, next peg, second peg, first peg, pull over, pull over, second loop, first peg, wrap, pull over, next peg. Like I said, you're just going to keep doing this across the board, and I'll meet you at the end. So I figured I should mention for beginners, when you're wrapping the yarn, you don't want to be too tight at this part because you're going to struggle getting the loops over, and you could end up knocking off all the stitches on your work and ending up having to try and find them. And if you don't find it properly, it could ruin your whole project, and all of this work you've just done would have to be restarted. So to make it a little easier to pull the stitches over, when you're taking the loop off the second peg, make sure to pull the string out a little bit, because this loop and this loop are all the same yarn. So when you put it over onto the first peg, it'll be easier for you to pull them off and around. Once you've wrapped it, it won't be as tight. It'll be really easy. And then because this is also the working yarn, this new loop, it's easier to pull on that and stretch it out to take off and onto the next peg. So just on the parts with the working yarn, make sure you pull on the yarn a little bit to make it nice and loose. So pull away from the peg. Pull away from the peg. And it's really easy to go up and over the top. So, and now you can just keep going. Okay, so we're at the very last two here. You're going to do your final cast off, wrap, pull over, second loop to first peg, pull over, and you can just leave the loop on that peg, but me wanting to follow what I normally do, I normally still put it back on that one peg. Okay, so you're going to wrap around the peg one last time and pull the stitch up and over. For this last stitch, you're just going to grab that loop, pull, you can even pull it off the loop, and you're just going to pull through a little bit of yarn, cut it, and pull tight. And you're done. Just need to, you can trim this a little bit, weave it through, and you've got your finished scarf. Now, this particular skein was 185 yards of yarn, and we still have quite a bit left over. So you could take some of that and add a fringe. You can do whatever you want with it, really. If you got some extra, you can make a matching hat or gloves, or maybe even a matching sweater for your pet. It's up to you. But for now, you've got your finished scarf. Have fun!